Okay, we are recording. Art, how are you today?
Good. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Um, Art, before we get into the song choices for today,
Uh,
I just want to ask you to. 'Cause I know that the touring's been happening, which is so exciting to see bands back out and playing, and festivals happening, and normal service resuming. Tell me how you found the 18 months of madness of lockdown and quarantine and such. Like how you found that both professionally and personally.
well, by the way, thanks for having me on today. I
You're
really
more
appreciate
than welcome, mate.
we're very excited about coming back to the UK after, God, almost 10 years, about 9 years. Um, well, professionally, it was a disaster. Just, I mean, from the point of just, at the beginning of the year, we had about 84 shows booked, to a couple of tours, a couple of whole bunch of like flyaway dates, which is how bands make their living now, especially older heritage bands like us that have been around a while. Um, you don't make records from record sales because no one buys records. Um, and So that's how we make our living. Me and the guys in my band and our crew and our team, our management agents and stuff like that. So we had 84 shows canceled. That's a lot of money. It's
Yeah,
over over $2 million worth of money. So and that wasn't $2 million to me, but that was, my share of it was what I lived on and paid my bills and did all that stuff. That didn't happen. And it was that was kind of devastating, but we've all dug our way out and caught our way up. I don't know how. We just kind of freeformed it and borrowed this, used this. You know, we were dancing, man. We made it work. Professionally, I don't think it hurt us with promoters. I think it might have helped everybody who was a known, reputable, professional touring band because there was an emotional, uh, more of an emotional uh, uh, demand from a lot of people. Now, when we went back out in 2001 and started playing shows again, while it was still, it was doing peaks and it was going down and it was going up as far as COVID is concerned. Uh, we went out and did a bunch of one-offs in the spring of 2020, and then we did a tour in June, July of, and then later in September, October of 21, as well as a lot more flyway dates. And while it was helpful, you know, uh, kind of our saving grace in a lot of ways financially, it was it was rough because there was a phenomenon that I'd never seen before, and I've been touring 30 some years, 40 year, almost 40 years, um, and it was that we would sell tickets and less people than bought tickets would show up, almost 20%, sometimes more. And that wasn't just us, that was something that was at every level. But below us, smaller clubs, you know, bigger arenas, theaters. Um, Everybody was experiencing this phenomenon. And then this last year, 2020, it got 2022, pardon me, it got better, but it was still there, probably about 3 to 5% of just people who bought tickets and then decided, man, can't do it. Don't feel good. Oh, I got COVID. Someone I know is sick, or just don't feel comfortable doing it and didn't go. So that has seemed to alleviate in the last 3 months. So hopefully, when we're over in the UK, it'll be okay. But I know that there's um, one of the Omicron uh, versions is kind of raging over there a little bit right now, right?
I mean, I've got to be honest. Uh, I run a venue, and I've not seen it affect like crowds over here. I think
Oh,
it feels, you know, kind of back to pre-COVID how it is over here. I saw the Lemonheads a couple of weekends ago,
Yeah,
and yeah, there was no shortage of people going crazy at that show.
great. And people weren't wearing masks.
No, no. I've had my club reopened. Wow, probably nearly a year now, I suppose. And yeah, just kind of normal service has resumed, and yeah, it seems quite relaxed in the UK.
Yeah, but the numbers over there are kind of crazy right now.
Yeah, mate, I don't know. I mean,
Well, I've been looking at them every day,
yeah,
and not good.
yeah,
And so people, so that brings into call responsibility.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so we were one of the few tours 2 years in a row. Our Summerland tour in 2021, which was us, um, Living Color, Hoobastank, and Wheatus. We not one person, 64 people of the bands and crew, not one person got COVID in 2021, but it was mainly because of our protocol, which was pretty strict of
yeah.
wearing masks. Everybody had to be vaxxed, and it was pretty strong. So yeah, I mean, that's a mixed thing. When you tell me, it's back to normal, it's not back to normal. You
Yeah.
can act back to normal, but it's not.
It's.
So,
I think one of the
so
weird things is over here at the moment is it doesn't really feature in the media anymore. Our news is so full of how atrocious our country is and how shocking our government is at the moment that nothing else seems to get a look in at the moment. And if they do, obviously the news focuses on the atrocities that are happening in the Ukraine. And aside from that, I've got to be honest. Like I've not seen a mention of COVID in mainstream news in the UK for quite a while now. Whereas it was obviously dominating everything, but yeah, it seems to be not getting a big look in. But yeah, our government are making a million and one mistakes at the moment, and that's probably another one of them.
yeah. Well, how did the Tories stay in power? I'm
Oh
sorry.
man, don't get me started on that, Art.
How did that happen? I just don't understand. You got rid of Boris, but then you got what's her name, Liz. Wow. Yeah. Okay. We won't go. We won't go into politics.
Oh God, no! Don't get me started on them. Yeah, that'll be that won't be a joyful listen for anyone.
You can tell I pay attention to what's going on. So no, but I do. I have seen in the last few months a lot more of that return to normalcy. My case in point, my daughter, who's almost 15, went on a date. I say date with this boy who took her to see Slipknot, right? But it was with his parents, and otherwise it wouldn't have happened. But no one was wearing masks, she said, and just full of people and having a blast. She went in the mosh pit, which is really funny because my daughter's like 5 foot tall. She's really, and apparently all the punk rock moms were in there protecting her. All the tattooed punk rock moms were like trying to keep creepy guys away from her. So
oh, great!
Isn't that great?
So cool.
Comes full circle, man. But yeah.
I've
But
been.
I'm excited. I'm excited that there is, like I'm all vaxxed up. We're all vaxxed up, so we're excited to come over and just especially playing with our buddies in Soul Asylum. We haven't toured with them for a few years, but we've done a couple tours with them.
Yeah.
Dave, I look up to Dave. Dave Perner is like one of the premier alternative rock and roll songwriters. I mean, I was a big fan of Soul Asylum back in the 80s when they came out with, the other Minneapolis bands like Replacements and my favorite, Who's. So this is a big deal whenever I get to play with Dave Perner, for sure.
Love it. Right, let's talk music. I'm going to ask you for a track And I'm going to
Okay.
ask you, Art, to tell me the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro.
Okay. So I was looking, okay. I'm just gonna put the caveat there. I just turned 60 years old.
Okay.
So
You look great, man.
a lot of the songs that um really made an impression on me really young. I was listening to radio and in love with I saw the Beatles in 65, 66 when I was like 3.5, 4 years old on TV, and I've never wanted to do anything else. So that being said, the most electrifying intro to any song I can think of, and there's a lot of them, is Whole Lot of Love by Led Zeppelin. When that guitar part starts, the bass comes in and it's just throbbing, and then his vocal comes in. I remember my brother took me to go buy that record. I didn't go to school that day. I think I was in second grade. My big brother, uh, we went and stood in line at a record store called it was a chain store called Licorice Pizza, and in Los Angeles, and he bought Led Zeppelin 2, and we took it home, and all his stoner hippie friends were hanging out in his bedroom, smoking pot, drinking. Middle of the mom would have been just not happy. And I'm this little kid sitting in the corner looking at the record cover, just all I couldn't get Whole Lot of Love out of my soul. I still can't to this day. And sometimes on stage we'll break into it just for fun. We'll break into it. We'll do a little bit of it, not a whole lot. But that intro is electrifying still to this day.
It's so weird. I've done 450 of these podcasts now, and no one's ever chose that. And when I put this podcast together at first, I thought surely someone's going to say this. Like first 10 episodes, surely someone must pick Whole Lot of Love. It's that huge and that instant and that iconic. And it's took 450 episodes for someone to
Really?
do it. Yeah,
Well,
yeah. You're the first, mate.
you're probably talking to people who are a lot cooler than me. I'm not.
Not at all, mate. Not at all.
I think people are like, that's not cool. What? I should say something that's cool. I'm just going to give you honest answers. But do you remember hearing? Yeah, I mean, do you remember hearing that for the first time when you were a kid?
Yeah, massively. There was a huge TV show in the UK called Top of the Pops. That was our kind of go-to TV shows. That was where everybody saw your bands, and yeah, that was a theme tune for quite a while. Like way back in the kind of 70s, late 70s, maybe even early 80s. But yeah, I think I probably would have heard it first on there, and yeah, I'd love to say it was something cooler, like I stumbled across someone jamming it, but it would have just been on a TV show. And yeah, sonically, it's just insane, isn't it? It's just if you're gonna if you say rock and roll riff, I mean that's up there, right? That's top five.
It's got to be. I mean that yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of them if you go back to classic rock, but that record, listening to it and looking at that cover as a kid and the biker gang that's on it, and there's almost kind of like Nazi like imagery and stuff like that going on, which is really kind of scary and startling, especially for a 7 or 8 year old, right?
Yeah.
And I remember just how cool that is, even to this day, just that throb, just dun, 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 dun. It's just like it affects your heartbeat,
Yeah.
So that's my pick for the first question.
Wonderful. I'm going to take you back for question 2, Art, and I'm going to ask you, please, to tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you.
Yeah, when I was a kid. Now, again, I grew up as a kid in the late 60s, mid-late 60s, early 70s. So I listened to a lot of what we called AM radio. Kind of BBC One back in the day would have been pretty close to it. But I listened to pop radio, and there was a song on there and uh, by an artist by the name of Otis Redding called Dock of the Bay. And it told the story of just of loneliness and loss and dashed dreams and just and acceptance and just all these themes into a 2.5 minute pop song with just a great melody and a great voice. And it was something that song would make me cry. To this day, that and Brown Eyed Girl by Van Morrison, because I'm old enough to remember hearing those on the radio when they were
Yeah.
new songs.
And not only is it a beautiful melody, Dock of the Bay, and a beautiful vocal, it's got to be one of the only songs that's got a whistle solo. Like whoever, like you don't get enough whistling in songs anymore, do you?
I agree wholeheartedly. And on our fifth record, I actually have a whistle part of where I was, because I remember my dad whistling. My dad was older, and I don't have too many memories of my dad because he left when I was 6. I mean, I knew him later in life, but not very close. We were never really that close. He died a few years ago, about 3 days before David Bowie died. And I was way more upset about David Bowie dying because even though I had met David Bowie once, not personally, but just as a music person, music lover, David Bowie gave me way more in my life. He gave me way more. He opened my mind to things. He gave me music that was my friends when I didn't have any other friends, and that's what songs are to me. And my dad didn't give me that, but I remember him whistling when I was a kid. He was a really good whistler. So yeah, I agree. Need more whistling. Maybe, you know what? I think it's about. I think the next song we record, we're recording songs now every 6 months. We got a brand new song coming out that's going to be out online in the next 2 to 3 weeks, called Year of the Tiger. And unfortunately, there's no time to get the whistle in on that
one. You mentioned that, that your dad left when you was quite young. Just tell me a little bit about that time and what home was like insofar as how musical was it? Would Mum have records on? Was there brothers and sisters? Was there music on at home?
Well, I was the youngest of 5 kids, and it was my mom and my dad. And my mom and dad were kind of like what we call white trash. They weren't really white trash, but they were like the poor man's version of Lucille Ball and Ricky Ricardo. My dad was Greek. He was dark. He was very handsome. Had an accent. My mom was very pale skinned, with red hair, and so that so I was the youngest of 5 kids. My eldest sister, who's 12 years older than me, who's still alive, as a matter of fact, she was really into Motown and R&B and stuff like that. She had actually went and seen the Tammy Show. I don't know if you know what the Tammy Show is.
The Tammy Terrell Show.
No, the Tamla Motown touring show that they played here in the States in 1965. Rolling Stones, Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder. Wow. They saw it at Santa Monica Civic in 1965. Anyway, so my brother, who was next in line, he's 9 years. He would be 9 years older than me. He was into more like aggressive rock and acid rock and stuff like that, and turned me on to Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, bands like that. And then my next sister, Kiki, was 8 years older than me, and she was more into like the Joni Mitchells, Cat Stevens, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Neil Young, stuff like that. And so I got turned on to a lot of that. My next sister, Vicky, 5 years older than me, she was into like bubblegum pop, on the radio. And I grew up in a housing project that, and as I grew older, like my African American friends got me into like R&B, like the Jackson Five, and then Parliament and James Brown and hardcore funk like Earth, Wind and Fire and Ohio Players and stuff like that. And my surfer friends got me more into like David Bowie and Alice Cooper and stuff like that. So I grew up with a lot of influences. Like there is no. Oh, my mom, of course, grew up in the deep South, so she loved country music, and she turned me on to country music. And everybody loved the Beatles. Everybody loved the Rolling Stones. So they were omnipresent everywhere. That music. So just a plethora of musical influences, and that's something that's really sad to me about kids today, is that they don't really listen to older music. It seems like a lot of the bands coming out now are just listening to what this guy or gal's doing over here, or this person's doing over here, and they're all trying to stay in the same lane. And there's no one really like digging deep into, there's just so much music available now digitally. You could use your phone and just listen to something from the 30s, and or something from the 50s or 60s or whatever. And there's so much creativity there that could affect you as an artist. And I think people are doing that.
I think it's a double-edged sword, Art. I think as much as it's incredible that you've got this whole library of music like on your phone, like just to be explored, for people of like our generations would have given anything. I could just about afford one like album a month, and but I think like now because there is everything within a split second
for free.
For free, I think that the attention span of people that are growing up now is getting shorter and shorter, and that association that we've got with you sitting in that room listening to Led Zeppelin, is the same for me with whether it be I don't know the Smiths or REM in the late 80s, sitting there listening to that, but I could only afford that one record, and I can attach a journey to where I got it. Sitting there staring at the sleeve whilst I put it on over and over and over. I couldn't afford anything else. And so that's why I think we're so passionate about these bands and these things, as you said about Bowie. These people have had massive impact on your lives. And I think that young people have everything. And I think it's a really good thing. But I do think that the shortening of the attention spans with a lot of young people, I think he's worrying.
It is a worry for sure. It's worrisome, and I agree. And as a parent, I see it. Like it's like teenagers have a hard time watching movies even now. They want everything in like TikTok, 20-second, 15, 30-second bites. Boom, swipe to the next thing. Swipe to the next thing. I mean, it's gotten really, really bad, and it's all digital. It's all on this thing right here, which is amazing that we have this technology, right? Right on this phone I'm holding, there's more computer than what launched all the rockets that went to the moon together in this little phone. And I have access to every encyclopedia, everything. If I know how to use this thing, there's nothing that I can't learn just about if there's no knowledge, written knowledge in this world. And do people use it for that? No. They look at it to see like people with big butts running around, or people jumping off fences backwards, and or cats. A lot of cats,
Okay. I'm going to ask you
I'm done writing songs, man. I don't know how to write.
I really hope the next Everclear video is just you doing backward jumps off of a fence dressed as a cat. That's whistling, obviously.
Or not a cat, but people dressed as tigers. Some people dressed as lamb, sheep, and pig with MAGA hats on. That's what we're.
Tell me about the song that reminds you of your time at school, please.
When you say school, what grades? Give me a grade.
Whatever one you think was the best for music.
I don't know. I mean, probably anywhere between second and sixth grade, like 1974. Between you listen to musical critics, and I've read books about it. They think anywhere between 1971 and 1974. That's where some of the most influential creative records came out. If I had to song, there's so many. I'm thinking of like Bill Withers, Lean on Me. That was a great song. Came out in 1972, 73. Stairway to Heaven. You couldn't get away from that song. That came out in 1972, I believe. If I had to pick one song that really made an impact on me back when I was in school, probably, when I was a younger kid in school, like first, second grade, probably the Beatles, Let It Be.
Ain't it crazy that you mentioned Let It Be there, and you mentioned Stairway to Heaven, two absolutely iconic singles from two of the biggest bands in music history. And
Right.
if either of those bands...
There's a reason for it, right?
Well, I know it, you know it, but if both of, if a songwriter walked into a record company now and went, I've got this song called Stairway to Heaven. It's over like 7 minutes long, and it doesn't really go anywhere for the first couple of minutes, but bear with it. They're getting laughed out the door. And it's like, Let It Be is this beautiful song, but we'll have to do a radio edit of that, or what can we do with it? And I find that's really worrying, and that goes back to, I don't want to sort of dwell on these attention spans, but these kind of legendary songs, if people are writing music like that now, they're not getting exposure, they're not getting pushed, in front of big audiences by these labels because they're too long. And you just think, my God, like people are never going to get a Bohemian Rhapsody, they're never going to get a Stairway to Heaven.
Well, I get that, and there's a part of me that really didn't like long songs, and because I loved like pop songs on the radio, that to me, if you can't say it in 3 minutes, it probably doesn't need to be said, right? But at the same time, a great song, a great lyric, and a great movement, and just the way those songs build, right? And start low and build up and crescendo and all that stuff. It doesn't feel, to me, if you actually listen to the song, it doesn't feel like you're listening for 6 or 7 minutes. It feels like you're listening for 2 or 3.
Yeah.
That's it. Like Hey Jude, when it came out, everybody freaked out because it was like, what was it, like 6 or 7 minutes long? And they're like, even the Capitol, the record company in the States is like, nah, no one's going to play this song. It was the Beatles, man. It was #1 for forever. Get out of here.
We're talking great records and formative years. So for track 4 up, tell me the first song you remember buying from a record store.
Like as a single?
Yeah, if you can remember a single, yeah.
Okay, because you said something earlier that really connected with me is like, man, I remember even as a teenager saving up my money to buy one album, and I would listen to that faithfully, right? And just digest everything on the cover, and that went into the 80s because I was broke, and you were talking about REM and the Smiths, and I remember buying all the REM records and just digesting them like they were the like they were the 10 Commandments or something. But First single that I bought was probably, that I can remember, was probably Jackson 5. My mom gave me money to buy the Jackson 5 song, ABC, when I was 7. Yeah, when I was 7. But the first album I remember I wanted my mom to buy was I remember we were at a supermarket when I was like 5 years old, and my sister was 10 years old, and they used to sell albums at the supermarket, right at the grocery store. And I wanted I wanted Jimi Hendrix, "Are You Experienced?"
Nice.
And she wanted like Peter and Gordon or some pop thing. And my mom's like, "I'm not going to buy either of those, but I'll buy this new Beatles record that just came out called Magical Mystery Tour." So, no, not Magical Mystery Tour, Sgt. Pepper's, with Sgt. Pepper.
Wow.
And she bought Sgt. Pepper's, and me and Vicky, my sister, had to share it. And I remember just like, and that was right as that you started hearing, all the singles that came off that record and how amazing that record is. Now, I've got an argument for you that if that album came out today or any time, I still think it would be influential and still be a hit. I think that record is that.
I think so. If the band were as established as the Beatles were then, by then they were the biggest band in the world, so they could, and even though it was such a departure from Revolver, the writing was on the wall, I think, with Revolver.
There was no records that sounded like that.
Yeah.
The records started sounding like that after that record came out.
Yeah. Did Pet Sounds come first, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. No. Pet Sounds?
Pet Sounds came before. Did it come before Sgt. Pepper's? I think it did.
Yeah, it did. It did. And there was production aspects on there, but I don't think that record sound. I, to this day, do not think Pet Sounds is a record on par with Sgt. Pepper's. I think Pet Sounds is a great exploration, but it doesn't have, well, for one thing, it's not as rock. And so even as a kid, I wanted to hear rock, hard rock, rock and roll. And so it didn't make the impact on me, but the Beach Boys were a pretty big band. They weren't as big as the Beatles, but they were all going, all the big bands at the time were going back and forth and trying to up the ante of like the new sounds and new ways of looking at music. I personally think that the album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles is probably the best record ever made, if not one of the top 3.
Absolutely. And you mentioned devouring record sleeves. If you're going to sit and look at a record sleeve, that's a good one to get stuck into, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. But all the Beatles ones were, later on, when they stopped getting away of just, vanity pictures of the boys, of the lads, as it were. That album cover, A Magical Mystery Tour, and they're walking around in the walrus suits and cow suits and stuff. As a kid, as an older person, I'd look at it and just go, that's kind of stupid. But when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, it was like, wow, what does that mean? What's the deep there? And even as a teenager, you're like, wow, what does that mean? On the Alice Cooper records, or the David Bowie records, or the Stones records of the early 70s. One of my favorite records of all time is an album called Exile on Main Street. And the very first song, when you talked about the opening track of a song, is like, I as a singer-songwriter and a guy who makes records, the first song on a record is really, really important to me. And some of the best ones that I've ever heard go from the Rolling Stones with a song called Rock Stop to a band, the Pixies, which is one of my favorite bands of all time, and their song Debaser, which is the first song on Doolittle. And that just, those are the songs where I call them head jerkers, but you hear them and you're just like, what is that? You know, like it just draws you in like a magnet. And I think that's really important. But I digress. I'm sorry.
No, you're in a safe space here if you want to talk about the Pixies. I've been playing in my club like DJing Pixies records to new students and young people week in week out for nearly 30 years. And when did the Baser come out? 89 maybe, 88, 89. No,
Yeah, 80,
was it 90? Yeah,
yeah. In Doolittle, yeah, Doolittle came
yeah.
out.
And to this day, if I play Debaser, Wave of Mutilation, Tame, anything, young people still lose their shit and do that thing that you said of like, whoa, like head turn. What's this?
Yeah, that record. I mean, and the first record, I have such a history with the Pixies, with the early Pixies like that. Uh, Surfer Rosa. We were at a record store. It was like late 80s. I'm in my early mid 20s. I'm with some friends, and we're at a record store. And a friend of mine had read about this band because he was really into more like Dead Can Dance and the other 4AD bands. He read about the Pixies because at that time you had to read about stuff in zines and fanzines and magazines and stuff. And he bought the Pixies tape and he listened to it and he's like, oh, this is too rock for me. I don't like this. I'll buy this right now from you. You just paid for it. I'll give you $6 right now for this tape. He's like, okay. And I went home and played it for my wife. It was like a Tuesday night. We both had to work the next day. We got in our car and drove over the Golden Gate Bridge up into the Redwoods and back. And we must have listened to that album, Surfer Rosa, 20 times, 15, 20 times. And same thing when Doolittle came out. I was downtown San Francisco, walking by a record store, and I'd already seen the Pixies open for the Throwing Muses. I'd already seen, I was already a huge fan. I knew they had a new album coming back, but there wasn't a lot of press on it. And all of a sudden there's a poster and I'm like, with a monkey on it. And I'm like, Pixies? And I asked the guy at the record store, I go in, I go, is that out? He goes, yeah, it's been out a couple of weeks. I go, do you have it on cassette? He goes, yeah. I bought it with my lunch money, right? All the money I had. And I was going back to work. I was working in an office and I put it in my Sony Walkman, cassette. And I'm walking back. I get about 2 songs in and then I stop at the corner or at the payphone because this is way before cell phones, right? 1989. Only rich people had cell phones. And I call and go, I don't feel good. I'm sick. I got to go home. I'll see you tomorrow. And I get on a city bus in San Francisco and I ride that thing till they actually kicked me off it 3 hours later. And it was, all I did was listen to that record. And I was married to my first wife. I've been married 4 times. I've been with my wife now for going on 19 years. But my first wife didn't want me to play in bands anymore. She wanted me to not play in bands. So for about 4 or 5 months, I was super depressed, wasn't playing in bands, didn't have a band. And I went home after listening to that record and just basically laid down on the lawn and said, I'm starting a band tomorrow. I'm going to put an ad in the paper. And if you don't want to be with me, okay. I'm sorry. That's sad to hear, but I got to do this for my soul because this music it's not like I wanted to make that music, but just that music like that could exist inspired me to make my own music. True story.
Perfect. Good decision.
I think so. Probably not for that. Anyway.
Tell me the song that soundtracked your years clubbing. So that can be rock bars, that can be dive bars, that can be bizarre techno clubs in Japan, that can be anything. A time where you'd go out and you'd party and you'd hear loud music.
Well, I'd grown up in LA, so yeah, I wasn't really a clubber, growing up. I'd go drink. I was a blackout drunk till I was about 20, 27 years old. I've been sober for 33 years. But in the early 80s, I was really into the Los Angeles punk rock scene. And there was one band that to this day is one of my favorite bands of all time, a band called X. And I remember just drinking in bars downtown and just, getting in cars and just listening to that. And different bands that were big at the time, the Violent Femmes first record, the Replacements, and any REM album up to Document, or those albums were really, really strong. But I'd have to say,
nice. I'm going to take you home for track 6, Art, and I'm going to ask you to tell me the favourite song from an artist from your home county.
it was probably be X. A song called White Girl. It's a punk rock song that was actually got played on early modern rock radio back in the day, but a song called White Girl by X. It's off their second album, Wild, which was critically acclaimed, acclaimed back in the day. All the critics loved that record, and rightfully so. I think White Girl.
And being young and starting bands and stuff around this time and seeing the bands that were influencing you and the bands that were from where you was from, did it always seem possible that you could make a career from doing this?
Absolutely. From a reasonable empirical point of view, absolutely not. I wasn't pretty. I mean, I grew up in LA where everybody looked like rock stars, right? And I didn't look like that. And I didn't want to look like that. So on my 16th birthday, I'm flying back to LA from Houston. My 16th birthday, I'm in Houston, Texas. I'm in the backseat of a car, stoned, drunk, making out with a hot girl who's 2 years older than me, right? And Eruption comes on the radio by Van Halen. And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm never going to be the best guitar player in the world. That's never going to happen. And even though it was kind of schlocky rock and I was getting more into new wave and punk rock, I loved how big the guitars and the drums were. I loved how big it was. And then the next song they played was Watching the Detectives by Elvis Costello, and just his voice and the production and his lyrics. And I'm like, I want to write songs like that with a big guitar sound like that, like Van Halen. And if you listen to Everclear records, it's kind of what it is. It's kind of, slice of life lyrics. There's a lot of anger, a lot of vitriol, and big guitars. So I've always been pretty true to what inspired me, from any given time, but especially then. I mean, that's still the kind of music I'm doing now. If you hear our new song, Year of the Tiger, it's a power pop punk rock song that's very political,
Love it. It's your last track, Art, and for this, I'm going to ask you to tell me a song that you think many people may not know that you would like them to hear.
Well, I'm a huge fan of, and I always have been, of like super rock, hard rock, punk rock, noisy bands. Love Sonic Youth, Pixies, all that stuff. At the same time, I love singer-songwriters, and I love anyone who can pick up a guitar and make a beautiful song with just their voice and a guitar. And one of my favorites is an Americana artist that's been around since the 90s by the name of Gillian Welch. And she's got a song called My Town. that every time I hear that song, it reduces me to tears. It's just such a beautiful melody and such a beautiful lyric and stripped down music. And I've always been a sucker for that. Neil Young, um, uh, The Needle and the Damage Done. That's a song that just really just kills me every time I hear it.
We put together a little Spotify playlist to accompany the podcast with all of these tracks, and obviously we'll be putting your music on there as well. Tell us a little bit about what the rest of 2022 has lined up for you, Art, and Everclear.
Well, starting tomorrow, I fly up to Portland, Oregon, where I lived for 22 years, and we kick off a Northwest tour. Everclear does, with the band Sponge, a band from the 90s, and we've got 5 shows. We've got Vancouver, BC, British Columbia, and Canada, Spokane, Seattle, Bend, Oregon, and Portland. And then we're off for about a week, and then we got a show down in LA or not LA, but like in Southern California at a casino. And then we go to the UK and we play in the UK. We tour, we have 8 shows with Soul Asylum. And then we have 3 shows by ourselves. And we come home for what we call Thanksgiving. It's a holiday in late November in America, in the US. And then we've got a couple shows at the beginning of December here in Los Angeles at a famous club called The Whiskey. And then we in a club called Pappy and Harriet's, which is out in the desert. And then we're off for the year, and then we start the new year in February. We go to Australia for an Australian tour, and it starts all over again. So that's what I got going on.
Honestly, like, I wish you all the best of it. I've had a real lovely time talking records with you, mate. It's been an absolute joy. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, brother. It's been great talking to you. Where's your club? What city do you live in? Do you live in London?
I live it's just outside of London. It's in a place called Essex. It's the longest running alternative rock club in the UK, and it started out in 1981, and it's in a place. It's next to a little town called Basildon. So our in-house band was Depeche Mode. They grew up and they were the resident band, and then over the years, we've had everyone from Radiohead to Blur and Africa Bambaataa to Boogeyman Productions and everything else in between. And it's called the Pink Toothbrush. It's a crazy, dirty, smelly little kind of crazy hole that is a safe haven for the weird and wonderful, and has always been that way.
I'd love to see it someday. I love those little clubs like that.
Oh, you'd love it.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Wonderful.
Well, listen, man, thanks for having me on. Thanks for talking to me about music. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. You take care, Art. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Art. It was great. Bye-bye.